She was betrayed by the only family she ever knew, sold to a stranger, and forced to give up her dreams, until a powerful billionaire stepped in and changed her fate forever. Lila Moreno thought she was just another forgotten girl, but a hidden birthmark revealed a truth that shook a dynasty. From bar fights to ballrooms, from heartbreak to healing, her journey will leave you breathless. Who really is Lila, and how did she rise from nothing to everything? Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe to hear more powerful African stories that will move your soul. The sea wind howled against the rusted gutters of the Moreno house, a chipped blue structure clinging to the edge of a crumbling street in a forgotten town along the Washington coast. Inside, Lila Moreno stood by the kitchen sink, her fingers raw from hours at the diner and her eyes heavy with exhaustion. At 22, she balanced textbooks, 2 part-time jobs, and the suffocating weight of a family that had never truly been hers. The air inside the house was as tense as the weather outside, always brittle, always cold. Marta, her adoptive mother, sat at the kitchen table like a storm waiting to erupt, her cigarette glowing as she exhaled smoke through tight, pursed lips. Across from her, Victor lounged with the self-assurance of a man who'd never earned anything. His girlfriend, Vanessa, perched on the countertop in a designer coat that reeked of second-hand luxury and bad decisions, scrolled through her phone as if oblivious to the tension in the room. "You're not pulling your weight," Marta snapped suddenly, slapping a manila envelope on the table. "We need 35 grand. Now, or Victor's in trouble. We're all in trouble." Lila blinked, the number cracking through her like ice. "What? Marta, I have rent, books, tuition." "Don't talk back to me," Marta hissed. "I raised you, fed you, housed you. You owe me." Victor chimed in lazily. "Yeah, sis, we're family. We stick together, right?" Lila's chest burned. Family. That word had been wielded like a chain her whole life, used to bind her to people who gave nothing but took everything. She gripped the edge of the sink to steady herself. "I don't have that kind of money." Marta's eyes narrowed. "Then find it, or you can kiss your degree goodbye." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat on the edge of her mattress, staring at her cracked ceiling and trying to breathe through the panic. She'd fought for that degree, for a life beyond this town, beyond this house, beyond being a servant to people who didn't see her as human. The only way out, she realized with a hollow kind of clarity, was through something she had never dared consider. Seattle. An underground bar she'd once heard about from a girl at school. A place where desperation walked in with heels too high and dignity too low and left with money in its purse and bruises on its soul. It wasn't legal, not exactly, but it was fast. And right now, fast was all she had. The city glittered like a lie as she stepped out of the cab, her clothes plain, her coat too thin. Inside the bar, the scent of whiskey and perfume mixed with the scent of polished power. Lila's boots clicked hesitantly on the marble floor, each step louder than the last. She kept her head down as men in suits laughed and women in diamonds twirled cocktails between perfectly manicured fingers. She felt like a ghost in this place, fragile and invisible. Then someone noticed her. A man, middle-aged and oily, with teeth too white and a smile too wide, approached her. "New girl?" he asked, already reaching for her arm. "Come with me, I'll show you how this works." She froze, her heart pounded, her instincts screaming. She was about to turn, to run, to abandon the whole insane idea when a calm, steel-edged voice cut through the haze. She said no. The man recoiled as another figure stepped forward, tall, dark-suited, and silent as a knife. His presence shifted the air, the room quieted. He had that kind of power. Caleb Whitaker. Even Lila had heard of him. Billionaire, ruthless dealmaker, the kind of man who didn't speak unless it mattered. And now he was looking directly at her. "Name?" he asked, his voice lower, curious. "Lila," she whispered, breathless. He studied her and then, without smiling, said, "Come with me. I'll make sure you never see that man again." She should have run. She should have said no. But with Marta's threat echoing in her mind and $35,000 hanging like a noose, Lila nodded and followed him into the night. The ride to Caleb's penthouse was steeped in silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the city bleeding past the windows. Lila sat still, hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes watching the lights flicker on the glass like ghosts trying to keep up. She didn't know what she expected. some cold transaction, a soulless exchange. But when the elevator doors opened into the expansive top floor of a high-rise overlooking Seattle's glittering skyline, all she felt was small. The space was modern and sharp, all clean lines and quiet wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the night, and the distant sounds of the world below seemed impossibly far away. Caleb poured himself a drink without a word, the amber liquid catching the light. He glanced at her from across the room, expression unreadable. "You can sit, or don't. Your choice." Lila hovered near the entrance, unsure if she belonged anywhere. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. He took a sip. "Because I could, and because no one else did." His words hit harder than she expected. He didn't look at her with pity. There was no judgment, no condescension, just a strange, almost clinical interest, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that had walked into his world uninvited. She didn't know why, but she told him everything. About Marta, about Victor and Vanessa, about the suffocating debt and the shattered dream of a degree so close she could taste it. Her voice broke halfway through, but she didn't stop. Caleb listened without interrupting, his gaze steady, arms folded as if absorbing every word and filing it away. When she finished, silence wrapped around them again. Then he stood, placed his glass on the counter, and said simply, "You can go." Lila blinked. "What? I've changed my mind. I'm not buying anything tonight. You're free to leave." Confusion swirled inside her. Relief and humiliation warred for dominance. "Why?" He turned away. "Because girls like you always come back." The words sank into her like ice. She didn't respond. She just walked out, her chest tight with shame, with fury, with something she couldn't name. That night, the cold outside felt kinder than anything else. She returned home just as the sun was rising, only to find Marta waiting with her arms crossed and eyes like daggers. "Well," she snapped, "where's the money?" "I couldn't do it," Lila murmured. Marta's lips twisted. "Then you'll do something else." A week later, her worst fear came true. Marta barged into her bedroom waving a paper like a victory flag. "You're out. I withdrew you from school. Got the refund. Already paid off half of Victor's debt. You're welcome." Lila stared at the letter, her stomach collapsing inward. You stole my future." "No," Marta said coldly, tossing a skimpy waitress outfit onto the bed. "I saved your life. Now get dressed. You've got a new job." The bar on the edge of town reeked of old beer and desperation. Flickering neon lights buzzed overhead as Lila weaved through tables filled with men who laughed too loud and stared too long. Every drink she served felt like a piece of herself chipped away. But she endured it. For what? She didn't know anymore. Maybe because she didn't have anywhere else to go. And then Derek Cole walked in. He slid onto a bar stool like he owned it, his grin slick with alcohol and menace. His eyes locked onto Lila immediately. "Hey there, sweetheart. Remember me?" She froze. He leaned in. "Marta said you'd come around. You don't want to disappoint your family, do you?" Panic surged through her. "Leave me alone." He grabbed her wrist, rough and firm. The bar around them laughed, the music thumping like a war drum. The room hushed. Caleb Whitaker stood at the entrance, all polished steel and quiet rage. In his tailored suit, he looked like a man out of place, but somehow more real than anyone else in the room. He crossed the floor without blinking, his eyes fixed on Derek. "I won't ask again." Derek hesitated, then released Lila's wrist with a muttered curse. Caleb turned to her and offered a hand. She didn't think, she just took it. Outside, under the cold moonlight, Lila let out a shaky breath. "Why are you here?" Caleb's jaw clenched. "Because you didn't come back, so I came to get you." The drive from that seedy bar to Caleb's countryside estate felt unreal. Like a fever dream Lila couldn't wake from. The night blurred past the window, trees and lights streaking by as she sat in the passenger seat, her wrists still stinging from Derek's grip. Caleb didn't speak. His hand stayed steady on the wheel, jaw tight, gaze forward. When they arrived, he led her inside without a word. The place was nothing like the sleek high-rise from before. This home was quieter, warmer, surrounded by woods and glass and silence. A fireplace crackled in the main room, its glow flickering against the stone walls. "You'll stay here tonight," Caleb said. "I'll handle Marta." Lila didn't argue. She didn't have the energy. She sank into the oversized couch, the cushions swallowing her whole. Caleb disappeared into another room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Her eyes landed on a framed photo on the shelf. Caleb with a much older man and woman, their faces unfamiliar, their smiles forced. The name Whitaker etched on a plaque below. When Caleb returned, he carried a blanket, draping it over her shoulders with surprising gentleness. "You shouldn't have had to go through that," he said quietly. Lila looked up at him, searching his face for an angle, a motive. "Why are you helping me?" He met her eyes. "Because I can't stand seeing someone fight that hard to survive and still be dragged back into hell." She wanted to cry, but didn't. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know what happens next." "I do," Caleb replied. "You go back to school. I already made the call. Your enrollment's reinstated." Lila blinked, her breath catching. "You what?" "It's done," he said simply. "No strings. I'm not Marta." In the morning, Caleb dropped her off at campus with a duffel bag of essentials and a quiet nod. He didn't wait for thanks. He just drove away. Lila stood there on the sidewalk, stunned, unsure if the past 24 hours had been real or if she'd dreamed him up. The days that followed passed in strange, unsteady peace. She stayed in a small campus apartment Caleb had arranged, throwing herself back into classes and late-night studying. Her professors welcomed her return with raised eyebrows, but no questions. She tried to pretend life was normal again, but shadows clung to her, especially when Marta's voice crackled over the phone one evening. Sharp and cruel. "You think you're free? You're not. Derek paid for a bride and he still wants what's his." Lila's blood ran cold. "I'm not going back." "Then I'll come get you," Marta hissed. "You owe us, girl. You owe me." She hung up before Lila could respond. 2 days later, they showed up. Marta and Victor, standing outside her dorm door like ghosts she'd buried alive. Lila barely had time to slam the door before they forced it open. Victor grabbed her arm, dragging her backward as Marta pulled a rope from her coat pocket, her voice shaking with manic rage. "If you won't come willingly, we'll make you. You don't get to walk away from family." Lila screamed, kicking and twisting as they shoved her toward the hallway. No one came, no one stopped them, until someone knocked. The knock was sharp, clean, commanding. A second later, the door burst open and Caleb strode in with 2 black-suited men behind him. His eyes locked on Lila, on the rope, the bruises, and his expression darkened into something lethal. "Let her go. Now." Marta laughed bitterly. "You think you can just steal her?" "She's not yours," Caleb said coldly, already lifting his phone. $5 million. Wired to your account. She's done with you." Victor's grip loosened. Marta faltered. A moment later, the guards separated them from Lila. Marta stood frozen, greed and rage battling in her eyes. But when her phone buzzed and she saw the transaction, she said nothing. She simply turned and walked out with Victor trailing behind. Lila stood shaking, the rope slipping from her wrist. Caleb stepped closer, his voice low. "You're safe now, for real this time." She didn't answer. She just collapsed into his arms, and for the first time let herself cry. Lila stared out the wide window of Caleb's estate, the forest stretching beyond the glass like a painting she couldn't quite step into. Her wrists still bore faint red marks, tender reminders of the rope Marta had used, of how close she'd come to losing herself again. Caleb sat in the armchair nearby, silent as always, his presence steady but unreadable. The fire crackled between them, casting gold across his face, softening the hard lines she was slowly learning to read. She turned toward him, voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you really doing all this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photo. A little girl with dark curls and wide eyes stood between 2 elegantly dressed parents, her smile bright, innocent. "This was taken 20 years ago," he said, "in New York. The Sinclair family. Their daughter disappeared during a winter storm. Everyone thought she drowned." Lila furrowed her brows. "I don't understand." Caleb leaned forward, his voice low. "The birthmark on your shoulder. It matches hers. Perfectly. A heart shape, just below the collarbone. I've seen it before, and so has Eleanor Sinclair." Lila shook her head, stunned. "You think I'm her?" "I think," he said carefully, "it's worth finding out." The idea was too wild, too far-fetched to accept, but something in her stirred. A tiny, fragile hope. She'd never remembered her life before Marta. Just flashes. A melody. A woman's perfume. A warm bed with sheets she hadn't earned. Nothing concrete. Nothing that made sense. The next morning, Caleb was already on the phone, calling investigators, scanning hospital records, adoption files. Within 48 hours, he had arranged a trip to New York. "If you are a Sinclair," he told her, "this will change everything." They landed under gray skies. Manhattan loomed around them, all glass and noise and impossible dreams. Caleb moved with calm purpose, leading her through a series of chauffeured cars and velvet corridors until they arrived at the Sinclair Hotel, a towering monument of old money and quiet power. That night, the Sinclairs were hosting a gala in the grand ballroom. Eleanor Sinclair would be there. Lila stood in front of a mirror in the guest suite, her nerves unraveling beneath a simple dress Caleb had chosen. Her hair was pulled back, her birthmark visible just below the strap. Caleb knocked, then entered, pausing when he saw her. "You look like you belong here," he said softly. "I don't feel like I do." He stepped closer, adjusting her necklace. "You will." The ballroom glittered like a dream. Chandeliers sparkled above as classical music danced through the air. Lila clung to Caleb's arm, trying to breathe. And then Eleanor appeared, tall, poised, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on Lila. They moved toward each other like magnets. Eleanor stopped just inches away, her gaze falling on the birthmark. "My God," she whispered, tears brimming. "It's you." The room quieted as she pulled Lila into a trembling embrace. "My little girl, my Catherine." Lila didn't know how to respond. Her heart thundered. The warmth of that embrace was like nothing she'd ever known. But the moment shattered when a cold voice rang out. "This is a scam." Alyssa Crane stepped forward in heels that clicked like accusations. A former classmate of Lila's, she looked polished and lethal. "She's not a Sinclair. She's Leila Moreno. Trash from Washington." Whispers swept the room. Cameras turned. Eleanor pulled back, stunned. Alyssa held up a folder. "DNA test. I had it done. It proves she's not related to you." Behind her, Marta stormed in, her face twisted with false righteousness. "I raised her. She's mine. She faked that birthmark, cut it into her own skin just to get your money." Lila's breath caught. The crowd leaned in, judgment heavy in the air. Eleanor's hands shook as she reached for the papers. Is it true?" Leila couldn't speak. Shame clamped around her throat, but Caleb did. He stepped forward, holding his phone high. "You should have deleted the footage, Alyssa." A video played on the ballroom screen, Alyssa handing an envelope of cash to a man in a lab coat, whispering about falsifying a DNA test. Gasps, silence. Then Eleanor turned, tears falling again, this time with relief. She opened a second file, this one stamped and sealed. "Real test. Done by my people. You're mine, Lila." Lila didn't move until Caleb stepped behind her, his hand on her shoulder. "Told you I'd fix it," he said, and somehow she believed him. The salty wind curled around Lila's hair as she stood on the shoreline of her old hometown, the very place where everything had unraveled and begun all at once. The sun dipped low, casting gold over the restless waves, and beside her, Caleb stood in worn jeans and a charcoal sweater, his usual steel demeanor softened by the ocean breeze. The jade pendant Eleanor had given her shimmered at her collarbone, its cool weight a symbol of everything she'd fought for, everything she'd reclaimed. "You've been quiet," Caleb said, his voice barely rising over the sound of the sea. Lila's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "I'm just letting it sink in." He stepped closer, shoulder brushing hers. "Not everything has changed, you know." She turned to him, a small, real smile tugging at her lips. "That's true," she said. "You're still here." They walked together along the tide line, the water curling around their ankles, the sky shifting from pink to a dusky violet. Caleb told her about the call from Eleanor that morning, how the Sinclair legacy, sprawling and influential, was now hers to step into whenever she was ready. Eleanor didn't want to rush her. "Heal first," she'd said, "then lead." The idea still felt surreal. Leila Moreno, once a girl scraping for tips and begging for permission to dream, now heir to an empire. But here with Caleb, the enormity of it faded. This beach, these waves, his voice, it grounded her. When they reached a quiet cove tucked between two jagged rocks, Caleb turned to her fully. His dark hair was tousled by the wind, his hands buried in his pockets. "I didn't bring you here just to say goodbye to the past," he said. Lila tilted her head. "Then, why?" He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a ring that sparkled like morning frost. Simple, elegant, a quiet promise. Her breath caught. "Because you walked into my life like a storm and somehow made everything still," he said, his voice laced with emotion. "I didn't think I was capable of love." I thought all I had to offer was protection. But you showed me something different. You showed me who I want to be." He took a deep breath. "So, Lila, I don't promise you the world. You already have that. I promise you me. Every broken, quiet, stubborn part of me. Will you marry me?" Her heart swelled. All the pain, the betrayal, the years of not knowing her place, all of it led here. Her voice wavered, but her answer was steady, yes. Tears clung to her lashes as he slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms, the wind swirling around them like a celebration. They married weeks later in a small ceremony on that same beach. Eleanor stood proudly at Lila's side, her hand firm in hers as they walked toward Caleb beneath an arch of driftwood and wildflowers. A few close friends from school came, along with Eleanor's oldest confidants, and even a few unexpected faces from Caleb's world, people he trusted enough to witness the moment. Lila wore a soft ivory dress, her hair down, the pendant resting against her heart. Caleb never looked away from her, not once, and when they exchanged vows, his voice didn't waver. The kiss that sealed it was quiet and deep, and the cheers that followed were just background noise. All Lila felt was him. Their life together unfolded gently. Lila moved into the Portland villa, where the once cold pool room now echoed with laughter and warmth. She finished her degree with honors, Eleanor and Caleb cheering the loudest as she walked across the stage, her diploma in hand. But her plans didn't stop there. With the Sinclair inheritance, she launched a foundation, the Tomorrow Project, designed to fund scholarships for girls from broken homes, for young women with nowhere else to go, for the ones who reminded her of herself. Her past wasn't something she ran from anymore. It became her purpose. One evening, while unpacking a box of donated books for the Foundation's first learning center, Caleb came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You're going to change the world," he whispered. She leaned back against him, smiling. "Maybe just a small part of it." They spent their honeymoon in a quiet coastal cottage, just a few miles from where it all began. At night, under a sky scattered with stars, they sat wrapped in blankets on the porch, listening to the sea. Lila rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I used to be so scared of everything." Caleb kissed her hair. "And now?" She looked up, her eyes clear. "Now I have you." He smiled, the rare kind that reached all the way to his soul. "You always did, Lila. From the first moment you walked into that bar, I was already yours." And in that moment, wrapped in moonlight and memory, Lila knew that she was exactly where she belonged, not because of the wealth or the name, but because she was finally, wholly seen, loved, free. Life lesson from Lila's journey. Lila's story is a powerful reminder that our beginnings do not define our endings. She came from a place of hardship, betrayal, and emotional neglect, raised by those who saw her as a means to an end, rather than a person with dreams. Yet through her courage, resilience, and the strength to trust again, she found not only her true identity, but also a love that cherished her. Sometimes the people we call family aren't the ones who share our blood, but those who choose to stand by us when it matters most. Lila's transformation from a girl trapped by fear to a woman empowered by truth and compassion shows that healing is possible, even when the scars run deep. It teaches us that we must hold on to our worth, even when others try to strip it away, and that walking away from what's toxic is the first step toward discovering the life we deserve. Caleb's quiet loyalty also reminds us that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the stillness, the hand that doesn't let go, the presence that never leaves, the voice that says, "I believe in you," when no one else does. Let Lila's story be a beacon. No matter where you start, you can rewrite your destiny. You are not bound by your pain. You are built by your perseverance. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear your story too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring African stories like this one. Your journey matters, and someone out there needs to hear it.